Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this digital roundtable, where we'll be celebrating the accomplishments of researchers in Canada, exploring the future of Canada's research ecosystem, and its impacts on society and Canada's future economy. And to do that, we have amazing top-level Canadian researchers from a variety of disciplines who are all winners of the Killam Prize for 2022, who I will introduce to you very soon. So before introducing our distinguished speakers, I'd like to invite Caroline Lucier, who's the Director for Arts Promotion for the Canada Council for the Arts, to introduce the session. Caroline, nice to have you.
Thank you, Tim, for this introduction. Bonjour et bienvenue à cette discussion qui s'annonce passionnante. It is my great pleasure to be here today to celebrate Canada's most inspiring scholars. I would like to thank the Killam Trusts, the members of the Killam Selection Committee, and our partner institutions for their contributions. This important program would not be possible without you. La gagnante et les gagnants des prix Killam sont parmi les figures d'innovation les plus avant-gardistes du Canada. Ils font progresser leurs domaines respectifs et positionnent le pays sur la scène internationale. Les récipiendaires des années précédentes ont démontré, à l'échelle mondiale, que le Canada est un chef de file en matière de créativité et d'innovation, et leur travail a amélioré la vie d'innombrables personnes. Au Conseil des arts, nous avons toujours considéré ces prix comme un outil puissant pour réunir certains des plus grands esprits du monde et leur permettre d'induire des changements positifs et durables. The Canada Council for the Arts is proud and honored to have administered the Killam program for more than 50 years. This year, we are handing the baton to the National Research Council of Canada, who will take on the administration of the Killam program going forward. This marks an exciting new era for the Killam program, and we are very pleased to be part of this journey. Of course, this makes this 2022 cohort, the last one to win the Killam Prize under the administration of the Canada Council, all the more special to us. I hope you'll enjoy spending some time with these amazing people in the panel discussion that will start in just a few minutes. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much, Caroline. As you mentioned, we really do have outstanding scholars with us today, of course, all of whom are winners of the Killam Prize for 2022, and each from one of the 5 research disciplines that the Killam Prize supports. Unfortunately, one of the 5 Killam Prize winners for 2022 could not make it with us today, and he is the winner for Natural Sciences, Mr. Jeffrey Ozen, who's a distinguished university professor in the chemistry department at the University of Toronto. Françoise, Salim, Carl, Jeff, thank you all for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to hearing your insights on this key topic. We'll be looking into the importance of research and its real-world applications, looking at the role of research and the role it plays in improving society and our future, and exploring how best to support our current and future researchers in Canada. So to get us started, I'd like to give you each a minute or two to briefly introduce yourselves and your area of focus. We'll start with you, Françoise.
So I'm a philosopher by training, and in general, I work on issues to do with human reproduction and the manipulation of the human embryo, most recently working on things to do with embryonic stem cell research, then moving to iPS cells, then looking more closely at different ways of modifying the human genome. And my work is typically around issues at the intersection of policy and practice. So obviously a lot of questions about research ethics, but also questions about translational research as you move from the lab into clinical trials. So currently most of my work now is on human genome editing, making better humans, whatever that might mean to some people.
Thank you very much, Françoise. Jeff, please tell us about yourself and what you're focused on.
Thank you, Tim. So I've been working in the area of rechargeable lithium batteries and lithium-ion batteries for 43 years. And my research group at the moment is supported through an NSERC Alliance grant with Tesla. We've been associated with Tesla since 2016, and it's been quite an amazing ride, because this company really has a mission of helping the world transition to renewables and electrified transportation. So I think they're the only company in the world that produces solar, electric vehicles, and grid energy storage products, all of which can put us where we need to go. So my research group is very thrilled to have this opportunity to work with a world leader and help to improve the lithium-ion battery products that are used in their devices.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. Next, we have Carl. Carl, please let us know who you are and what you spend your time focusing on.
Thank you very much. My work is with the area of race and racialization, and I'm very keen on understanding how race informs, especially for racialized youth and racialized people generally in our Canadian society, how that informs their experiences, how it informs the opportunities that they have access to, and be able to take those opportunities to be able to live and survive and succeed in the society. Much of my research started with Black youth. I was very curious when, maybe about 30 years ago, when a number of youth were trying to adjust to the Canadian society. And I'm very interested in how multiculturalism enables or not enable some of these things to take place. And so from there, I started to pay attention to these experiences of young people and racialized young people, using and looking at Canadian census. And one of the important things for me is constantly revisiting people I've interviewed to find out over a period of time if things change or have things remained the same for them. So I'm very interested in the longitudinal aspect of people's lives. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Carl. Very interesting work. And then last but not least, we have Salim Yusuf. Please, Salim, your turn to tell us what you're about.
Tim, I'm a cardiologist. I started my research career with my DPhil at Oxford on trying to improve ways of reducing death in people who get heart attacks. At that time, there was practically no treatment in 1976. And since then, we've been working on it step by step. And I'm pleased to say that now we have treatments that can halve the death rate and complication rate from heart attacks, or even more. Most heart disease occurs in developing countries and in poor people within any society, whether developed or developing countries. And so we need treatments that are widely applicable and affordable and widely accessible. And our work has been focused on trying to develop simple, low-cost prevention and treatment strategies that's applicable worldwide and in every and most settings of the world. And I'm pleased to say, last year we brought together our work and demonstrated that combining different approaches to blood pressure lowering, cholesterol lowering, and simple aspirin would prevent 50% of the heart disease and heart disease death, and strokes as well, at a cost of less than 25 cents a day.
Thank you, all four of you, Françoise, Jeff, Carl, Salim. Thank you so much for being here. Let's get right into it, if you don't mind. So the first topic I'd like to launch us into is the importance of research. And I'd like to know why we should invest in and support research in Canada, and why it's important for Canadian society and Canada's future economy that we have world-leading researchers in Canada. It might be a very self-evident question for a panel of researchers, but for the rest of us, how do you describe that importance?
I think the most important thing about research and emphasizing its importance is that it cultivates and grows a spirit and a culture of inquiry in society. That is all pervasive. It means we challenged believed facts and given wisdom, and we are willing to think in new ways for new solutions, and sometimes even identify new problems when we didn't recognize problems exist. So the most important thing of research is that spirit of inquiry and go beyond existing boundaries. and it broadens the mind, not just of individuals, but of society as a whole. Obviously, there are specific benefits in different areas that we can hone down on in the biological sciences and the health sciences, in terms of improved health, in engineering, in improved products, but also, as we heard from Jeff, in potentially saving the planet. And as we heard from Françoise, in the philosophical underpinnings of what all of us do, and in making society more equal and just, which is probably what Carl is working on. So I think of research as underpinning a progressive society. That's what I think of research.
I like the idea of inquiry and constantly inquiring about the issues and always. And I thought of it as it forms knowledge as well, and building on that. And of course, it advances the social and political, economic, and health development that we need. And so that inquiry, and we have to build in, I think, that into the culture of the society, to always feel that if there's a question, if the issue we're trying to investigate or look at, we can turn it into a question and then do a research around it, then it advances the society, and it builds the society. One of the other things I think is also we build on each other's research. And of course, research is not necessarily just simply social sciences, but we borrow from the different disciplines as well in building that research. And I think that makes for a very, very important aspect of the society and the building of the society, and make us advance in terms of the knowledge and other things that we need to know in order to be the kind of society we wish to be.
I think one of the really important things about research is the fact that when we have university and government labs doing research, we're training people. We're training graduate students to think outside the box. We're training them to tackle problems that have never been tackled before. And then when they go on to their future careers, they can apply these skills in whatever field it may be. Without research, I don't know where these people would come from. I think there would be none, and that would be really very terrible.
I think for me, when I heard the question originally, one of the things that I think is actually really important is the reference to Canada and what's Canada's role in this. And I think Canadians need to be there because we can. We're a very rich country, and we're very lucky in that regard. And I think in that context, we actually have obligations, not only to train our own, but to think about that commitment to knowledge production in the ways that it will benefit people around the world. And for me, that means not just in terms of the outputs or the outcomes of research, but the active engagement and participation with people so that they can be part of that research endeavor. And I think then what becomes really important is the role of people around the world in priority setting. So for me, one of the most interesting things about the commitment to research is which questions do we choose to research and which questions get set aside?
If I may add to that, in introducing the idea of Canada, because if society is going to be different politically, economically, socially, and going to be different in terms of the population, and that should inform the fact that, yes, while the other people might be doing research, what it is in our particular context that we need to be able to answer or need to investigate in particular ways in order to satisfy us.
I would go beyond priority setting and getting people engaged in priority setting. I would say getting involved in the research themselves and developing research capacity globally. And if Canadians or we or individuals help other people, and I'm not saying other countries or other universities or other communities, just other people, to be stronger in research, the whole enterprise gets lifted up. The tide will lift everybody. And I think, therefore, it's our role to emphasize to policymakers the importance of Canada being an international player to both learn from people outside, but also give to the world. And as Françoise said, Canada is a rich country. We should be doing more and giving more.
When we look at how we conduct and support research in Canada, what do you think we're doing right? What do you think we're doing wrong? And then based on that, how should we, and by we, I mean governments, academia, businesses, society, other stakeholders that you think might need to be addressed? So how should we be thinking differently about how we conduct, approach, and support research and researchers in Canada?
One of the things I'd like to have both our research institutes, be they in the private sector or the public sector, have our governments think about is, what's the purpose of research? And I think the purpose should be to make this world a better place for us all. And if that's your starting point, you don't have to have improving the economy as one of the main targets. I'd rather it be a side effect. So I think it's great if that should happen, but I think we really ought to be focused on other kinds of priorities. And so that's kind of where I would be coming from with respect to this question.
I think what we are doing right is at least there's talk at universities and some action in promoting research, at least in many of the major universities in Canada. We do give credit and value research in the country up to a point. The word is up to a point. We do have high quality universities and who are productive, but I think for a rich country, we don't invest enough in research. The talk from the government is all about how research is going to improve the economy, which is completely appropriate for certain areas, like my area, okay, health. You can have products that improve health, you prevent people from getting disease, you save money, so you can make a case. But how do you value research in the social sciences, in the philosophies? You can't put an economic number to that. So I think we need to use a yardstick that goes beyond economics, and certainly beyond short-term economics. For instance, many of the things that I'm sure people on this call do, you don't realize the full benefits of that for 10, 15, 20 years. So we need mechanisms to sustain it. The other thing is, you do need different kinds of research, not only different disciplines of research. You need research that is goal-oriented, so things that are mature very quickly, you can take it to the next steps. The next steps could be a commercial product, it could be societal impact, it could be, sending somebody out to outer space, whatever. Or it could be knowledge for knowledge's sake, which in due course will lead to greater impact.
I want to add to that and think through. If we manage to evolve a society where we see all these things intersect, and if I approach it by starting with economy, then I will have to also see what happens socially, politically, and culturally. All will inform the economy as well. So even though my research is, my starting point is looking at how the economic benefit, I will also have to see how that economic benefit is related to also the idea of having everybody housed, etc., etc. So I would always think that what we cannot see it in just simply unilateral terms. We might see the interconnections between all these ways in which we're going to do research. So health research cannot be seen as separate from what the social sciences. For example, right now, one of the research that we're involved with is looking at how racialized Canadians might have access to liver transplant or kidney transplant. And when I was reading the data, it also said the economic implications of not having the transplant and what that might do. So there's a health benefit and there's an economic benefit and there's social benefits, because when you think of how families might be able to survive or live more happily because of the kinds of transplant.
I guess I really like what Françoise said about research should make the world a better place. There's no doubt about it. But Tim sort of asked at the beginning, what do we do well in Canada? And when I talk to my peers around the world, I think there's three things that we do in Canada that are really good, and maybe they're not funded at a high enough level, but I think they're really, really good programs. And the first is the Canada Foundation for Innovation that allows us to bring infrastructure into the universities to enable us to do state-of-the-art research. This doesn't exist in other countries. The second is the Discovery Grants program that NSERC supports to support basic research. Virtually every researcher in science and engineering has a discovery grant that allows them to do basically anything they want, and that's really wonderful. And then finally is the partnerships program that NSERC runs, where industry and university can, do collaborative research together. And in such programs, there's really encourages spin-off companies and startups.
I'll read out a statement, and I'd like to see if you agree or disagree with it, which is that Canada's great at research and innovation, but we're not that great at taking our ideas and applying them in the real world or commercializing them. Do you agree, disagree? And if so, what do we need to do to bridge that gap?
I'd just like to say that I think one of the important things that's been recognized and is being started to be corrected is the importance of mentors who have started companies based on university research and have been successful. So if you take Silicon Valley, for an example, there's a multitude of startups that have become very big corporations, and the people who commercialize that work, they know what was done. In Canada, there's not the same group of mentors around. And this is being addressed through the creation of things like the Creative Destruction Laboratory, where startup companies have access to mentors like this who are giving their time more or less freely to these startups to help them, navigate the paths of commercialization and scale up and so on. I've seen one example myself, a startup from my lab called Zen Electric Bikes. Very fortunate to have access to a mentor who's taken a company from zero to a listing on the NASDAQ stock exchange. And access to this particular fellow it's night and day. Without his advice and knowledge, it would not be going well at all. So I think having access to these folks that have, done it all is incredibly important to move things along.
I think commercialization is sort of a Venn diagram that has multiple components to it. It isn't totally the researchers who can make it happen. Researchers are important. Governments creating the right incentive and economic environment becomes important. Industry finding whether Canada is an attractive place to set up laboratories. It's one thing to say their main head office may be in Switzerland or the UK or the US, and then they will fund a little bit of a lab here or there. But it should be more like the model in the UK or in the US, where major industry-based laboratories are based in Canada, juxtaposed to universities. And the last thing is the business environment. You need all of this. Let us face it, Canada is a small country in terms of a market. I face that in my work. Like often when we are competing for a major award from industry, the unsaid thing that sways it away to a US competitor is they have a market 10 times bigger than us. Now, there's nothing I can do about it directly, but are there other advantages that collectively government, local industry, business, and researchers can create? Because clearly Israel is not a big market, but yet they attract a lot of money. So there's something they've done that is bringing in funds. Again, Switzerland was not a big market. In fact, still isn't a big market, but they've got a disproportionately high share of investment. So we have to try to learn from these countries is what will help.
I would also say that I think Canada has and continues to make really important contributions in the area that I'm familiar with in terms of ethics and policy. And when Canadians are at those tables, whether it's the World Health Organization, whether it's the OECD, whether it's UNESCO, I think we actually have an impact. And at least in terms of the opportunities I've had, one of the things I've been really proud of is that impact very often is focused on issues of social justice. And that's not to say that there are not other people who also have that focus, but at least I've been privileged to see those kinds of priorities brought to the fore, and in many cases, shaping important initiatives, whether, as I say, they're at the WHO level, for example.
I also want to add, in relation to researchers working with commercial enterprises, I also want to think that communities are also important for us to make partnership with too, and local communities, because the more we sometimes answer some of these communities' questions, and also address some of the issues that they need to address, it could also influence and inform the larger progress of our society. So I would always want to think that researchers will work with communities, and before we use there are sometimes deliberate research projects that could be done between universities and communities as partners.
That touches on the next topic, which is talent. And of course, within talent, we have the concept of experience. Talent takes many shapes and forms. We know, and this is across all sectors, all disciplines, that the war for talent, including talent in the form of the best researchers around, that war is intense, it's global. I'd like to hear from you how you think we're doing in Canada in terms of training the best homegrown research talent. But similarly, how we're performing in terms of attracting and then retaining the best research talent from abroad. And if you have any ideas on what we have to do to improve on those counts, I'd love to hear those as well.
I find, at least in the health sciences, and I don't know how this is in the other areas, there is reasonable investment at the entry level into research, PhDs, postdocs, but far less investment once people pass that threshold into developing a sustainable career, their own salary support, and sustained long-term funding, which actually occurs in places like the UK, so that there is a career stream in the UK, at least in the health sciences, where people can, as long as they're productive, with 5 or 10-year reviews, remain productive for the rest of their lives. One of the most famous epidemiologists, Sir Richard Dahl, who was the person who discovered smoking did all kinds of bad things to you, said he never wrote a single grant in his life, And I'm not advocating for that, but the Canadian system, at least in the health sciences, where there isn't a mechanism where you take the top 100 people in the field and say, you're going to have long-term funding. Tell us every 5 years or 10 years what you did, and we'll review what you did. But you don't go through this cycle of writing grants all the time, which takes an enormous amount of time. And at least in my discipline, the success rate is 12%. So imagine the amount of wasted time. Now, why is this relevant to talent retention? It's one thing to get them past postdoc, but how do you give them a career? They're not going to stay in Canada if they don't see a career, if they don't see that in their university. And so I think there needs to be a Canadian strategy by which young faculty, mid-level faculty, and senior faculty all can devote the bulk of their time to actually doing research as opposed to keeping on writing grants. And I must admit, my research group that I head writes about 25 grants every 6 months. Imagine the hundreds of hours that are wasted. And we probably get about 5 or 6 of them each cycle, which is better than the national batting average. But the others don't get it.
That also comes with having international students as well with whom we work. And I think that network, I think, it will certainly build research, will certainly build knowledge that we talked about earlier, and also expand talent. I'm also thinking in the social sciences and in some also other sciences, there's a kind of research chair, which I think is an attempt to also get at some of these long-term funding. But I would get back to the whole way in which how we might think about and how equity and social justice might be thought of when we think of these long terms, especially how we're going to invite and bring new talent into that pool of funding research.
I think right now we've seen over time that the government's investment in the academic setting, both for learning and for teaching, has been reduced. And this has created pressures in terms of seeking adequate funding to support really worthwhile projects. And I think that there's both a need and an obligation to really revisit that, so that we're not only thinking about what happens in the university in terms of the metrics that we already have, but that we're willing to understand and introduce new metrics. And I do worry that some of the metrics that are in place force people to work more quickly than they might otherwise do. And so I've become a proponent of slow science in the context of asking people to take the time to refine the question. And then we need to actually have an environment, a context that values that. The reason I say that is because we count things, and the more we count things, the more academics who are really smart people use their talent to meet those metrics. So if I'm supposed to get X number of millions of dollars in research, I will do that. If I'm supposed to get X number of publications, I will do that. If I'm supposed to get X number of patents, I will do that. But there's the risk over time that the real goals and objectives become the side effects of those which are set up as the primary metrics that you're trying to satisfy. I say to people now, when I got my first academic job, I did not have a single publication. And I've had a wonderful time as an academic, and I think I've met, various metrics of success. And I cannot imagine a young person with a lot of talent hoping to get a foot in the door with 0 publications. And so I say that only in the context of saying we actually don't have a good way of embracing all of the talent and maximizing what people have to contribute. And I think that we really could do ourselves a favor by rethinking some of the ways in which we've set up our metrics for success.
I want to speak about motivating the next generation. You're obviously all people who lead a team of young researchers. You have students. What has to be done to motivate and support the next generation of Canadian innovators, including underrepresented groups? And if you look at your own path and the milestones along it, what would be your advice to young Canadian researchers and scientists who wish to create a better world? Jeff, how about we start with you?
I certainly think the longitudinal studies, especially in the social sciences, as Salim has suggested, will be very attractive to the next generation. And we will have to build some mechanisms into that, especially insofar as culture changes, especially insofar as we're always moving in towards trying to be more responsive to the society and try to think of how we might be more equitable and think towards social justice. One of the important things I'd add to that is also constantly thinking of the research team. The diversity of the research team is so important as well, because we all bring our various experiences, and that would add significantly. And so as we invite new researchers or junior researchers, we're inviting new people onto research teams, and also the diversity of that research team is going to enhance the kinds of work that we put out.
In my area, which is advanced battery research, the real goals are to help with the electrification of everything and move the world towards eliminating fossil fuels. And believe me, the graduate students that join our group don't need any motivation at all. They're young, they see what's happening with global warming, and they want to help. They want to do something that can move us in the right direction.
Within Canada, the most important thing in the health sciences, I can tell you, is the huge gap between those who are primarily clinical in their incomes and stability of career versus those who are in research. You make less money, you work harder, and your funding is 3 to 5 years. So it's what you compare yourself with. Somebody in health sciences doesn't compare themselves with, sorry, Françoise, a philosopher. They compare themselves with other people in health sciences. Maybe they ought to compare themselves with philosophers. So I think providing at least a system of long-term funding, and by long-term funding, I mean the potential to have 20, 30 years of funding. And why do I say that? The big questions in health do take that long to sort out, like even smoking and lung cancer, which increases the risk of 20-fold by so many cancers, took 25 years of a very large study to show it. So prevention of cancers, prevention of dementia, which is a big issue. If you want to prevent dementia, you've got to start studying people at the age of 50 and then see what happens when they're 70 or 80. So at least for some questions within some field, you need some long-term funding.
I, as a young person, once thought that I could change the world. And, I thought that was a realistic goal or objective, and that's why people went into research. With a lot of years behind me now, I realized that that wasn't a goal that I could achieve. I'm not saying other people can't achieve that, but it wasn't something that I could achieve. And where I pulled back to was this idea that I could make a difference in terms of making the powerful care. And that's become my mantra for the last 10 years or so. And so what becomes really important for people in the humanities is figuring out who has power in this system, and then figuring out what are the ways in which you can help them to care about the projects that you think are important. And for me, that circles back to a lot of the conversation we've been having. So I want powerful people to not just care about the economy or to have another lens. I want powerful people to be willing to interrogate the ways in which we are currently funding both the educational and the research systems, where they're interlinked in terms of academia. I want everything to potentially be up for grabs, re-examination, and novel solutions to existing problems.
Well, you definitely have made a difference. Hence, the award from the Killam Prize for 2022 to all of you. I want to say congratulations to all of you again for that. I'm Tim Penketh. I'm the founder and CEO of TheFutureEconomy.ca. I want to thank you, my guests. I really want to thank the Canada Council for the Arts, the Killam Trusts, and the Killam Laureates. And I want to thank you for watching. Thank you very much.